There was a time when I loved the forest. Now I can't stand to be near them. The very mention of their wooded nature causes me to shudder uncontrollably. But once, I would have run unchecked through those coppery expanses of near-skeletal trees, kicking leaves up in a shower of colour and smells. If I try, I imagine I can remember it for the sake of this book. It would have been the aroma of moss and lichen, earthy dirt and stagnant water that would encase me in a wonderful delight I would lose hours to. And I did once. I was an only child and often alone in my forest playground. I would build forts or imagine great battles with trolls and elves, and I, the only warrior brave enough to win the day. But that was a boy's dream, and I'm no longer that boy. That boy died the moment I set foot into the crow's tree. The local kids called it that because it looked like a huge crow, poised, ready to devour your soul. The tree was long dead. Some say it was a disease that infected the whole forest, only it didn't survive like the others, and instead curled in itself in shame. Other mundane renditions are that it was struck by lightning 20 times. Whichever the case, it's the only tree I picture when I close my eyes now. The centre of the crow's tree is split, and the top half bends over like the wings of a crow. The base, although intact, forms what looks like a podium. It is a harsh, hacking creature straight out of a nightmare. Where the two halves of the trunk meet, there's a hollow that is perpetually full of water, no matter the time of year or season. I was careful when climbing it, because if disturbed, it would reek for hours. A cloying, stagnant aroma of death and wooded decay. I often played around the trunk, not believing in the stories or the rumours. It was just another tree to launch my defence against the troll army, until I fell. Do you know that feeling when you miss the last step and your foot falls through the air where the next step was supposed to be? It was a reverse for me. I saw the water in that hollow and expected to stop and get covered with foul-smelling water. I knew my mother would scream at me for never being able to get that stench out of my clothes, but I didn't. I fell through the inky blackness and kept on falling. When I stopped, the world around me had changed. I tasted blood. I couldn't tell if it was my own or the taste of the iron in the dirt that filled my mouth. My vision swam when I sat up, a disillusioned shamble of fractal images and the odd sound that the inverted impact has caused. The air around me was hot and oppressive. It was like I was in a sauna and not the English countryside. I wanted to rip my clothes off there and then. It had a full, punchy feeling, a cloying stickiness and an underlying feeling of dread. The ground was coated in black sand, as if the world had spewed forth a shower of broken glass so fine it was powder. I pushed my fingers into it and was rewarded with instant pain. Blood flecked on my fingers from the tiny perforations. I didn't recognise my whereabouts. Everything was different, even the trees. When I raised my head to the sky, nothing showed but a canvas of grey. It was like the world had been washed out. Tired, hurt, and feeling that I was either dead or transported to another dimension, I decided that I had to try and find my way back. I walked for miles that day. I would stop whenever I saw a puddle or pooling of water, but it never satisfied my uncontrollable thirst. I never ate. The land was barren of animals in my hours of trekking, barren of seed, nuts or berries. Hunger gnawed at me. The thirst pulled at me, and my mind clawed at me. After many hours of searching for anything remotely familiar, I stopped and collapsed out of sheer desperation. I was 12 years old, goddammit. I didn't know how to survive. And I was cast into a realm of torture, of trial, and incalculable punishment. It was then that I knew the rumours to be true. The crow's tree was a pathway to hell. Tears wet my face and dried instantly. Even my grief had no place in a land like this. I wrapped myself into a ball by a fallen tree and wished my life away. I wished with all my heart that I could see my home again, see the people who loved me as I loved them, give anything to run through those coppery trees and play imaginary wars with trolls. A sound cut through my nightmare. A hacking, sawing sound. The sound of metal on metal. The sharp scrape of machines and immovable objects. My interest peaked. I ventured forward. I saw men. or what I took for be men, working against the crooked trees. They were large and oddly shaped, like a puppeteer had pulled a copious amount of dummies apart and built a monstrosity out of the pieces. Stitching sewed them together down lines of jagged flesh red with their rawness. Overlong arms ending in iron stumps or mean-looking saws worked against the fallen trees. 2 of them cut them down. 2 more put the trunk in a machine that was divided. It would then progress through the malformed hand tools and machines until wafer-thin stacks of paper laid virgin on the floor. If I was where I knew I was, then this paper was made from the trees of hell. Any 12-year-old would kill to have this as a textbook. In my years now, I realised men would kill for it too, but for different reasons. I crept forward silently, always keeping the demons in sight. I drew near the chopping machine, the steady rhythm of the saw grating on my ears. The blade twanged with every stroke, the sound worse than nails on a chalkboard. When I came to the papers, I hadn't seen another demon working crouched over them. Its bent form wasn't from years of toil, but rather the skillful insertion of a blade. The demon had been cut numerous times across his chest and stomach, allowing it to bend over like the leaves of an accordion. I slunk back, afraid I had been seen, but I hadn't. The demon, grossly warped and disfigured, worked plying the pages together into a book. When it was done, it cast them haphazardly over its shoulder, neither caring where or watching where they fell. I followed one to a spot on the ground where it should have landed, but all I found was sand. I waited in the shadows of an old withered tree like a catcher in a cricket game until he tossed another book. With speed I never knew I had, I darted out and caught it and ran back to my sanctuary. The book was an iridescent white and oddly warm to the touch. The moment I caught it, I knew I had done wrong. I could never be apart from the book as much as my head could be apart from my body. It was mine, but I was its. I ran then. Ran and didn't stop. I didn't know how long, maybe hours or days. I ran and ran and ran until I came to a barren patch of land. The ground was mottled, the black sand giving way to shards of green and festering red. Exhausted, elated, and petrified that my deed had been found out, I collapsed. The buttery smell of fresh grass brought me back from my tiredness. The aroma of earth and dirt, moss and stagnant water perked me up. I was so close to home. All I had to do was fall back through the water on the hollow and my nightmare would end. And so I climbed. I climbed high enough so that my fall would penetrate the water and propel me back to my woodland battlefield. Things often happen the way you envision them, and sometimes they don't. I pushed off that split trunk, my feet aiming for the pool of blackness, but when I made contact, I didn't sail back to my woods or to the loved ones that were surely missing me every second I was away. No, I didn't go home. I stayed in hell. The book, nestled in the crook of my arm, forced its way out of my grip. The pages flew open like a hurricane, blowing open the roof of Dorothy's house. I screamed then, a primal, fear-induced vocal assault that did nothing. The book swallowed me. First my feet, then my body, and finally my mind. Do you know what it's like to be a book? Neither did I. I had so many leaves I felt like the Constantina man hunched over those evil pages. I was trapped in darkness, walled in by a book I could never read or write in. Time moved on. My 12 years doubled and tripled time and time again. I grew insane, haunted by the phantoms of my own imagination. Hell perpetuated that book, filling me with unimaginable horrors until I no longer had a shred of goodness. And then there was movement. Someone had found me. Light, dizzyingly bright, cast away the horrors that festered on my soul. A young girl peered curiously within my bindings, and unbeknownst to her, I peered back. I found a strange comfort in her hands and in her words. Her simple scribbled hello brought unbinding pain to my personified skin. Inwardly I cried out, and the mark of her word vanished, replaced by my own jarred scrawl. For a moment, we both drew in shuddering breaths. She flipped to the next page looking for a elasive salutation, and only found my fading scream. Tentatively, she placed the nib of the pen on my surface and wrote again.
Hello, I'm Lucy.
This time I was ready for the pain and greeted it with grim resolution. I would come to relish the pain, relish the words that caused me anguish and lust and torment and greed.
Hello, Lucy.
She paused for a moment. I saw her lip tremble and thought she wouldn't go on.
What are you?
I am a friend, a companion for your darkest times.
She contemplated my words and seemed to settle on their honesty.
You can tell me anything, and I will keep it a secret. You do want to tell me something, don't you, Lucy?
Yes, I do.
She sat in the shadows of the crow's tree and wrote Lucy's diary, large and bold at the top, each letter a desolation of verbatim.
John hit me again today.
Who's John?
John's my stepdad, not my real dad. He died when I was 2.
Her first sentence was clumsy and hesitant, but I willed her on with my own compulsion. Lucy soon gained momentum and wrote until nightfall caused her to stop.
Tell me what happened, Lucy. I'm here for you. Always here.
He beat my mum again for not knowing where his favourite beer glass was. Can I tell you a secret? I suppose I can. No one will read this but me. And you wouldn't share my secret, would you?
Never.
I know where it is. I smashed it accidentally when I was washing up. I didn't tell Mum because I didn't want her to get into trouble. I was scared that he would hit her again, and I was right.
Day after day she poured her soul onto my pages, and I ate them up, urging her on with my own companionship. The scratch of her pen soon divulged the extent of her abusive father, a neglectful mother. I let her ramble while I poured some of myself into the ink, staining her wrist as she brashly wrote her accounts. My poison would be her salvation.
I love you, diary. You're the only one I can talk to without feeling stupid or fearful. If John found you, well, I know he would tear you up in front of me just out of spite. Mum has started drinking again. She's worse than ever before. I asked her today what's for dinner, and she didn't even reply. She just gave me a cold stare like I was dead to her, and turned away. Her eyes were still dark from the bruises John gave her over the glass. I think she blames me for it.
John's depravity isn't your fault. He's a wicked man that deserves to be punished.
But I can't punish him. He's my stepfather and an adult. He would kill me or Mum if he finds out it was me.
They both deserve to die for the pain they have caused you. Do it while they sleep. It will be easy.
I did not know when she would do what we planned for her to do. Every day she fought against those that should have loved her unconditionally. I poured more and more of my malice into Lucy, hoping that she could use it to free herself. I never slept. Instead, I was always ready to receive her words on my skin, always ready to feel those harrowing verbs. Lucy opened my bent spine and scratched away so fast that I couldn't get over the pain to read the words. Wave after wave numbed me until I felt my being on fire. And then a new feeling broke through the pain. The cold splash of tears. I felt the first like a drop of rain in a drought, the cool sensation nullifying my pain and anger. Through bated breaths, I read her transgressions and revelled in her liberation. She had not only killed her stepfather, but her mother too. I was elated. Her words darkened further, a conviction, a confession, a note to those who would find her. Blood, sweet blood dripped onto my pages. Lucy took her life under the crow's tree. Her blood welled in the shadows of my bindings while I drank away her repentance, leaving nothing behind but stained pages devoid of words. I wept then. A sliver of humanity still left inside me after all the years bound to the damn pages and its hellish origin. I gazed up at Lucy's slack face, peace finally finding her where life could not. She had gone, and a piece of me with her. I knew the world to be a cruel place. The whispers of my oblivion convinced me of such things. Endless years laid bare to the atrocities of hell, and man alike educated a 12-year-old boy to a 1,200-year-old demon. In Lucy's lap, I waited for my next charge. I came to be held by multiple hands until I was left untouched in a plastic bag. I knew darkness again. Lucy's words, hidden to those who gazed at my skin, blended with my own into a motley of toxic texts until I became liberated from my confines. The warmth of a touch broke through the darkness. Something new graced my pages. Numbers, hundreds of them in neat, tidy columns. I wondered what I had become, who held me, and why. So I took those numbers away from the page and wrote some of my own with unfleeting corruption. I wanted to feel the agony of this man, know his pain, his desires, his terrible dark secrets so I could exploit them. But instead, I felt his trembling hands discard me like the leaves of an autumn tree. I fell through the air and landed with a shocking blow on the side of the road. The man in his fright had cast me out the window like a bad smell. Angry and frustrated, I dwelled in my punishment. However, new hands, soft and supple with youth, picked me up and turned me over. The curiosity of a child again found us winging through the streets on his bicycle. I knew his elation at his discovery as I pressed against the insides of his coat. He took me home and wrapped me up as a present. Anxiously, I waited in my new skin for my new owner to behold me. But I cautioned myself to not be rash this time. I had scared away the man with my numeral outbursts and spoilt my fun. This time, I would treat the new person like I did Lucy. I waited for days until I felt the stir of hands and unbound joy. Disgusted, I barely held back my contemptuous lines from forming on the page as a man peered inside. His bushy eyebrows wrinkled with wonder at my unique pages until he closed the cover and was gone. That night he opened my folds and traced fingers down my leaves. In the brief touch, I knew his debauchery and countless infidelities. I had found someone warranting my embrace. The man began to write, and I drew in a shuddering breath. Maybe he thought debasing himself within my cover would exalt his deeds. Perhaps it was to unload his glorification so that he could immortalise his actions. Whichever the case, I loathed and worshipped each passing sentence. This man, David, needed no encouragement from me, despite a loving family and a respected position within society. He soaked up my penitent's essence and laid bare his soul. I took a gamble and wrote back in clumsy lines.
I've searched a long time for someone like you. Someone worthy of my discretion. Someone like you, David.
The pen stopped and trembled. Out of fear or surprise, I do not know. But it did touch down again and responded. We conversed for a time. Him wanted to know what I was and how such a thing could be. I divulged my origins and my malice and greed for attention. A pact formed. One where I would ease his burden of grief and morbid curiosities by consuming his words so no one could find them. And he would bring others to me and make them write their anguish on my rough pages before he tortured and killed them. For many years our symbiotic relationship existed until David grew ill. His end of our agreement wavered and finally stopped. David was no longer able to grace my pages with blood or words. I wrote him a way out,
pull a knife across your skin and soak into me for eternity.
I had the means and the will for both. I had already consumed his essence and deeds in the words he scrawled in his killing sprees. David made one last request before his parting. A request I would never have known possible from him. He wanted me cast into a fire, obliterated from this plane. And he was obliged. I was taken to the very forest where it all began. I could sense the crow's tree calling me like a magnet pulling its brother from afar. But my destination wasn't the fires of hell, but the inferno of a bonfire. I was cast unyielding, unfettered across the night sky into a furnace of nature, and I burnt along with my brothers and sisters. Our bark blistered, our skin melted, our essence smouldered to the embrace of ashen skies and curling smoke on a winter breeze. I knew pain like a lover, but this was far worse. I cried out so loud that the fire repelled around me. I withered in phenomenal pain until I fell to the bottom of that pyre. My brothers and sisters martyred themselves to protect what little I had left. My pages, cover and spine melting in the fire. I laid smouldering for hours, prostrate to the world and its fickle emotions. Time collapsed around me. Seasons changed. A time of rain, snow, leaves and decay in an endless circle of death, birth and regrowth. Until new hands scratched away the soil covering my disfigured cover and held me up to the light. Yes, that's right. You hold me now, broken and forsaken. Do with me what you must. I no longer care where or whom I'm bound to. But please, I only seek a few words within my bindings, so I may know you again, so I may feel alive.